Hello friends. Welcome to Luffy Fiction. How are you all? So here I am back with part 2 of What If Luffy Was Adopted by the Moby Beep crew. But before we start, if you want more amazing stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Also, if possible, share this video with your friends. Now, without wasting any more time, let's continue the story. Marco, you know if you kill him, Oyaji's going to be pissed, yoi. I'd be more worried about Ace. Thatch laughed, sending Luffy flying backwards with a well-timed kick to the teen's gut. Would you just shut up and watch? I know what I'm doing. Marco shook his head. I thought you were supposed to be taking it easy. We are Mom. God, shut up Marco and let me concentrate, or fight the kid yourself if you're so worried. Can I call him Mom, too? Luffy panted, lucking out and connecting. Do it, and not even Ace can save you, was Marco's good-natured rejoinder as he continued to watch carefully, making sure neither overdid it. Fighting Luffy was a good workout for Thatch. The division commander was still slightly out of shape after his brush with death. Not to mention he rarely went against opponents who preferred to brawl. Marco wanted to make sure he didn't overtax himself or the boy. It happened in an instant. One of those stupid accidents that could cost someone their life in a real fight. Luffy stumbled, foot coming down on a bow staff someone had forgotten to put away. Marco cursed himself for not noticing it sooner, even as he dove forward to try and protect the kid now down from Thatch's powerful chop. He could see it in his friend's eyes that the swordsman couldn't stop in time. A foot snaked out, sandal loose, and hooked under the very staff that had tripped the kid, flipping it up into the air in a move Marco recognized. His eyes widened in shock as Luffy caught the staff and slammed it into Thatch's swords with bone-jarring force. Grinning widely, the teen executed a twist and flick Ace was fond of, sending one sword clattering towards the deck even as the 4th Division commander danced out of the range of the tip of the staff. Marco took the opportunity to step between them, heart in his throat at the close call. That's enough. Letting out a low whistle, Thatch flopped onto the deck next to Luffy. Impressive, brat. Ace never said you could use weapons. Thanks. Me and Ace grew up using pipes. Kid stuff, it's kinda the same. Marco remembered the few non-Luffy-centric stories Ace told of his childhood. They tended to involve large beasts and the hunting of said monsters. He could see where using any kind of weapon, even a pipe, would be useful. Ace at least still carried a weapon on himself though. Luffy didn't, leading many on board to think the brat had no clue how to use anything, let alone a sword. Sitting with the other two, he was surprised to see Thatch was a bit out of breath. He nudged his friend, mildly concerned. You alright, yoi? I'm fine. Despite his words, the 4th Division commander didn't argue when Marco loosened his cravat. He did roll his eyes and slap Marco's hands away from the buttons of the shirt, however. Come on, Marco. I'm not that irresistible. The shirt hit the deck with a wettish-sounding plop. Thatch's chest was covered in sweat, telling Marco that his friend had definitely pushed himself a bit more than he had originally thought. Now the question was if he'd pushed it too much. Thatch didn't grumble as Marco ran his hands over the scars littering his body. Though the 1st Division commander hadn't had experience with his own injuries in decades, he'd patched up enough people to be reasonably proficient. He noticed Luffy watching with a bland look, gaze running over all the old scars that littered the swordsman's torso, and wondered what the boy was thinking. Thatch grinned beepily at the younger pirate. Like what you see. Zoro has a lot of scars, too. Luffy shrugged. He said it's a swordsman, pride or something. Well, there are some who see it like that. The 4th Division commander agreed. I didn't ask that, though. What do you think, kiddo? I don't like seeing all of them. Some scars are cool. Like the ones you get fighting a whole bunch of Marines, or like the ones Zoro has from when he tried to cut off his own feet that one time. That sounded like an interesting story. Creepy, but interesting. But the one he has from Mihawk on his chest bothers me. There was a pause. He fought Mihawk? Marco asked, impressed. Yeah, way back at Barati. He lost, though. Luffy flopped backwards, pouting. It was obvious that he was upset. Still, he survived. Thatch pointed out, leaning forward so his friend could finger the wound that had nearly ended his life. It had healed, but it was obvious by the way he twitched under Marco's gentle prodding that it was still tender. Marco sighed. The proof that he should have ended the fight sooner hard to deny even if he knew the other commander would deny it. I think you might need to go see the nurses, Yoy. WH. Thatch sputtered predictably, turning to shoot his friend a hurt look. Marco. Come on, man. You know if I do that Oyaji'll find out, and I won't be able to do anything fun for the next week at least. Better that than finding out you've torn something. Marco shot back, not budging. Why do you have a scar on your back? Both turned to see the younger now half sitting, braced by his arms and staring at the horrible scar on Thatch's back. It's nothing to worry about, kid. Thatch turned back to grin at the younger pirate. Marco here is just getting all worked up over nothing. It's not nothing, Yoy. You almost died, Marco snapped. Died. Luffy's brows furrowed, confused, and the two Whitebeard pirates shared a look. Neither really wanted to tell him about Teach's betrayal, but the guy was after Luffy. Besides, even if Marco wouldn't dare admit it out loud, the brat was family. And not just because he was Ace's little brother, either. Finally Thatch sighed. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard how your big brother is hunting down a former crewmate, right? Well, I guess you could say I took the brunt of the betrayal. What happened? Ace only said that the guy he was after was a traitor. Luffy frowned. He never said anything about someone dying. Hey, almost dying. Thatch half yelped. Big difference there, brat. Don't go killing me off like that. Sorry. It dawned on Marco why his ship brother wouldn't have mentioned it then. When he'd first left to hunt down the traitor, Thatch had still been in really bad shape. The fool probably didn't want to do or say anything that might have jinxed his friend's recovery. Ace probably didn't want to worry you, Yoy. Why would I worry? Ace is strong. He's gonna find this Blackbeard guy and beat him up for you. I'm sure he will. Thatch agreed easily. Still, Teach isn't someone to be taken lightly, right? Luffy sat straight up and gaped at them both. Teach. Yeah, Marshal D. Teach. Marco felt like he was definitely missing something as Luffy scowled. What? Ace only ever called him Blackbeard. I met that bastard. I knew I should have beat him up. The half-grin Thatch had been wearing fell off his face in a flash as Marco felt himself blanch at the thought. Wait, what? Thatch asked. I met him. On Jaya. You're kidding, right? Luffy huffed, crossing his arms. Why would I joke about that asshole? I don't like him, and he's got bad taste in pies. Apparently he saw the disbelief on their faces. Big guy, bad teeth, laughs funny. Asshole. Well, that sure sounded like Teach, alright. It wasn't a comforting idea at all, even if it did explain how the bastard seemed to know who Strafut Luffy was. And here Marco had been hoping that the man had only been threatening to go after the kid as a way to rile up Ace. He nodded reluctantly. Sounds like him, Yoy. Next time I see him, I'm going to kill him. Luffy had this strange look on his face. What? Thatch yelped, visibly panicking. Luffy looked at Thatch like he was an idiot. He hurt you. You're my friend. I don't like it when people hurt my friends. So I'm going to kill him. The way he explained it was like it was the most logical thing in the world, and the 1st Division commander had to admit that given what he knew of how the team grew up, it probably was. But he's, and you, Ace, oh god, let us handle it. Marco cut in on Thatch's sputtered protests. He was part of our crew. That make him our problem, Yoy. No reason for you to get involved. He was relieved when Luffy looked away, pouting. There was nothing he could say to that after all, and it was better for him to be a little disappointed now than to end up dead later. No one on the crew wanted that. Finally Luffy looked up at him, and Marco did not like the look in the kid's eye. No, Mr. Giant Mustache wants me to join the crew, so that makes it my problem too. But, you said no. Thatch's voice was high-pitched. So, then I said yes. Marco thought back, and damn if the kid hadn't. I thought you were joking. The boy shrugged. Doesn't matter. We're still nakama, still friends. Even when I go back to my own crew, we're still gonna be friends, right? Both men nodded. Right. And friends help each other. So I'm gonna kill Blackbeard for hurting one of my friends. Both men stared at him. For a guy who was supposed to be stupid, that was actually downright smart. Conniving, actually. Ace had said Luffy usually got his way, but Marco didn't think he meant like this. Maybe the D stood for determined. If it wasn't bad enough that they were having to stop Ace, now they had to worry about Luffy, and something told Marco that he wouldn't listen half as well to Oyaji. One thing was for sure, Luffy sure as hell wasn't leaving the ship until Blackbeard was taken care of now. Blenheim couldn't remember the last time that Mihawk had even been within firing range of the Moby beep, let alone dared to come aboard. The Shichibukai wasn't exactly unwelcome, since more than a few of the crew enjoyed sparring with the world's best swordsman when their paths crossed for Oyaji to ban the man. It just wasn't like their relationship with some of the other Shichibukai, like Jinbei, who was practically one of Oyaji's sons, or Hanbeep, who went wherever the hell she wanted with her nose up in the air like a big beep you to the world. You had to admire her spunk. Sure, she was batshit crazy, but she and Oyaji had an understanding of sorts. Mihawk was more like a cousin you only saw at reunions, and reluctantly at that. Which begged the question of what the hell the man was doing pulling his skiff up to the Moby beep now, without sending any sort of prior warning. He didn't like the feel of it, it made his scalp tingle. That was always annoying as hell since his hair was braided and it was a real bitch to scratch that tingle out without looking like you had head lice or some shit. He got the feeling that Oyaji had an idea what the man was there for, and judging by the looks on his fellow commanders' faces, he wasn't the only one. If it was the reason he thought, Mihawk was in for one hell of a fight, because there was no beeping way they were going to give up their youngest brother without one. Whether he was officially family yet or not, or if he knew he was family or not, he'd been on the crew long enough to recognize the fierce look of mine, ours, on most of his younger siblings' faces. So Blenheim was far from surprised when the hawk-eyed pirate's arrival on deck was met with open animosity. He was more surprised that it wasn't an openly hostile environment the lone man stood in front of. Or that the crew didn't start growling. Though, if Ace had been on deck instead of God knew where napping with his little brother, there definitely would have been growling. Cold predatory eyes swept over the crew before Mihawk strode forward towards Newgate, overly large sword strapped to his back. Standing before the much larger man, Hawkeye frowned. I believe you and I need to have a talk, Whitebeard. Why's that, brat? Whitebeard grinned down at him. You know why. Mihawk bit back as close to a temper as Blenheim had ever seen the man, and that was including the time he'd stumbled across Mihawk piss-ass drunk when he was a teen and convinced him to trade his sword for a smoked fish. He'd still lost the duel. Kid was a monster with anything sword-like even at that age. It was then he knew that his suspicion was correct. Mihawk was here about Luffy. How the man found out was still a mystery, though. The dark-haired man had the audacity to turn his back on their captain and walk back towards his skiff, ignoring the killer intent that was rapidly growing on deck. First though, allow me to bring my traveling companions on board. The bastard didn't even phrase it as a question. The 9th Division commander was sure someone would have cracked under the tension and lunged at the man as he leaned over the rail if it hadn't been for the warning look Oyaji shot his sons. Instead they all watched, ready to spring at the first sign of betrayal, as the man signaled down to whoever was on the skiff to join them on deck before strolling, ballsy son of a bitch, back over to Oyaji. It wasn't long before a girl with large overdone eyes and ridiculously pink hair floated up, obviously a devil fruit user. She was not happy with the person following her up, as she kept shouting down insults to them. Some were pretty creative, too. Perona. Mihawk's tone was an odd mixture of rebuke, warning, and dare he believe it. A hint of fondness. Whether or not the girl heard all that when he said her name, Blenheim knew that name was familiar in a vague way, so she was reasonably strong. But not a sword fighter or he would have remembered who she was. He was getting old, you couldn't expect him to remember everyone, right? Right. She stopped her heckling and moved to the side with a huff. The moment she did, a head of short green hair appeared over the rail, followed by a very, very annoyed young man. He had broad shoulders and well-muscled arms, and Blenheim recognized him as a fellow swordsman before he even saw the 3 swords tucked into the wide haramaki. The look in his eyes is what marked him as a predator to the core, just like Mihawk. Something about those 3 swords nagged at him, but he couldn't remember, not with all the bitching and moaning going on around him. Did he mention that the young man was annoyed? It spilled off the young man in waves as he stormed over to where Mihawk stood. It would have been comical if the old commander had been sure the annoyance stemmed from the fact that the girl was once again pestering him. For some reason she seemed to be of the opinion that he was going to somehow get lost on the way from the rail to Oyaji's chair. Now, Blenheim's seen some downright crazy shit in the 20+ years he'd been on board the Moby Beep, but getting lost on the way to the chair while on deck just wasn't possible. "Why the hell are we here, Hawkeye?" the green-haired youth bit out the moment he reached the other, ignoring Oyaji past a wary glance. The fact he was disrespecting their captain was insulting enough that usually at least one of the commanders would have stepped forward, but none did. Blenheim suspected they were all waiting for the Shichibukai to kill the fool for speaking to him like that. "Because we need to be, boy." Mihawk's answer earned crossed arms and a loud huff from the teen and shocked looks from the crew. Oyaji just laughed. "I'm glad we amuse you, Whitebeard." "Ah, so what was it that you wanted to talk to me about, brat?" Mihawk glowered. He didn't think the man could do that. Shanks. Oyaji actually put his tankard down and stared at the man before him. "Yes, Shanks, what you told him, and this fool here." Mihawk gestured at the young man who was still glaring at everyone and everything. "I have had no rest for the last few days, Whitebeard, and I hold you responsible." "Gahahaha. What makes you say that? Do not play with me. I'm not the fool Shanks is. I have talked to the man, and I know very well who you are hiding on your ship." The captain, strongest man in the world, narrowed his eyes just a hair's breadth, the grin still on his face. It wasn't the warm look the crew was familiar with. This was the smile of a wild beast before it mauled you. "And what are you going to do about it, Hawkeye Mihawk?" "Simply this." He turned to the green-haired young man. "Zoro." "Yeah." The teen looked slightly cross, and his hands instantly went to the 3 swords at his waist. What was it about 3 swords that was ringing a bell? Damn it. Strafut is here, on this ship. Mihawk just went and told him the very thing they'd been trying to keep a beeping secret for weeks now like it was nothing. Blenheim had had enough. He shoved his way to the front of the crowd and glowered at the Shichibukai that he had had a small hand in raising to greatness. "What the hell, Mihawk?" The beep just shrugged. "It's his captain. Does he not have the right to know where his captain went?" "Captain." Blenheim didn't remember anyone on the Strafut bounty posters with green hair. It hit him like one of Harada's pirouette attacks, the 3 swords. "Pirate Hunter. Roronoa Zoro. Luffy's here." The annoyed look was gone in a flash of surprise that just as quickly gave way to hot rage. He didn't raise his voice to Oyaji, but the threat was there. "What have you done to my captain?" "Oh, like you even care. You just used the poor kid anyway." Judging by the way the rage went cold, calculatingly brutally cold, that was not the thing to say. Blenheim hoped someone got the name of the dumbshit who'd spoken out of turn so he could personally open up a can of whoop ass on him after this was all over. Because right now, standing in front of Roronoa, it was obvious that while Pirate Hunter might have started out as a homage to the swordsman's odd beginnings as a bounty hunter, it was now an apt description of what he was. And even though they were, for the most part, stronger, that look said they were royally beeped if they thought they were going to talk this out. He had to try anyway. "Damn it. Listen, we didn't do shit to your captain, alright. Then why is he here?" "Oh good, it looked like it was working. He landed here." That was easy enough to answer. Apparently he was wrong. Killer intent started to radiate off the young supernova. "What have you done to Luffy?" "I told you, nothing." "Then he wouldn't still be here." A sword was drawn, and Blenheim couldn't find it in himself to blame the brat. Here he was, standing before the whole crew, ready to fight to the death to get his captain back. That he understood. He waved his brothers and sisters back before the situation could escalate out of control, wondering why Oyaji was just watching. "Calm down, it's not like that." He found a sword scant centimeters from his nose for his troubles. "Then what did you do?" "Bribe him with meat." "Don't be meat." At the sound the green-haired pirate looked around in an actual panic, which seemed surprising since it came from the very person he was so desperate to find a second ago. Gum rocket. "Luffy don't." A blur of red, blue and yellow slammed into Roronoa and sent them both tumbling. Blenheim's eyes slowly tracked from the empty air where the pirate hunter had been to where he was now. "Huh, well, guess that's why he was freaking out." "Gahahahahahaha. Ace my boy, did you have a good rest?" "Yeah, Until someone woke us up with all that yelling. What the hell is going on, Oyaji? Mihawk seems to have found one of Luffy's crew members. Found. More like had him dumped upon me. Perona as well. My castle has gotten quite noisy of late, Whitebeard. Ace visibly perked up, ignoring Mihawk completely. Which member? Meat. Zoro. I'm hungry. Luffy half cheered in that infectious way he had. He blinked, looking down at the man he was still sitting on. Zoro. Zoro. Instantly he was latched onto the other again, laughing and grinning, happier than Blenheim had seen him, though if he'd been there when Ace had come back, he was sure it would have looked like this. Zoro. Huh. Ace's smile was easygoing, relaxed, and the crew picked up on it. Any lingering hostility faded at the obvious calm the 2nd Division commander felt about this man being so close to his precious little brother. Luffy, get off me already. The swordsman had to fight to get to his feet, entangling Luffy's arms repeatedly in the process. Despite his scowl and the angry tone, Luffy continued to laugh. That's enough, you idiot. A fist connected with a rubbery head and instantly the Whitebeard pirates were ready to rip this guy a new one all over again. Boot Zoro. Luffy pouted. The other looked away, apparently as unable to take the hurt puppy look as they were. He grumbled a bit. I get it. You missed me. You don't have to try and crush me to death to show me. He was worried about you. Ace put in, causing Roronoa to look over at him. If he was shocked, he didn't show it. Ace. Zoro. Ace grinned. I'm surprised you found us without getting lost. I'm not that bad. Shehehehe. Quit laughing. I'm not. Yes, you are. The pink-haired girl chimed in, unable to stop herself. Luffy stared at her for a moment before he pointed a finger at her. His mouth dropped open in shock. Ghost girl. It's Perona, she shouted back, the cute tone completely gone. Luffy shrugged. But I thought Nami said Kuma did something to you. Perona huffed, crossing her arms. He did. He sent me to the best place in the world. Until he got lost there and interrupted my lovely haunted castle. Blenheim was pretty sure he heard Mihawk mutter something about it being his castle in the first place, but he could have been mistaken. Oh. Luffy gave Zoro one of his trademark grins. Come on, let me show you around. You come, too, ghost girl. Perona, she screeched right in his ear, trailing after him. Ace shrugged, turning to Oyaji. I better go keep an eye on them. Luffy's bad enough, but from what I know he can talk Zoro into almost anything. Make sure they don't destroy my ship. Oyaji's face broke out into a wide grin. Don't let them get lost, either. Aye, Captain. Ace laughed, trotting after his brother. Blue, wait up. Whitebeard turned his attention to Mihawk, who had remained mostly silent during all of this. So what was your real reason for bringing him here, brat? Mihawk was never one for answering questions directly. When I first met him, Roronoa told me that he was going to defeat me. That it was his dream to be the world's best swordsman. That when you cut him down? Blenheim asked. When Hawkeye looked at him with a slightly raised brow he sighed. I saw that scar, or the start of it. I know your handiwork, Mihawk. You almost split the brat in two. He survived. You like that little shit, don't you? The other said nothing. Damn, got yourself a protege, huh? Mihawk ignored him, or it seemed like it, at least. A short time ago he stood before me yet again and I asked what his goal was. You know what he said, Whitebeard. To beat you and be the best, right? To be the best, because that was what the Luffy, his captain, needed him to be. When he looked again at Blenheim before turning his attention back to Oyaji, the older pirate saw pride and wonder in the man's eyes. I know as a Shichibukai I should be bringing Strafut in, but I've seen how those two boys have grown in such a short time. It would be interesting to see how much more they can grow. Whitebeard sat back. Are you suggesting I take on this brat? This Roronoa Zoro? No. The answer was quick, angry even. Before long he'd surpass all but your commanders, and I doubt they have the time nor the inclination to train someone like Zoro. What makes you say that? Blenheim mused, not really offended since he was getting too old to deal with a young hot-headed brat, but mildly annoyed to be brushed aside like that. Hawkeye curled his lips slightly. He is very literal-minded and direct. It's like dealing with a young Shanks all over again. A drunk Shanks. But if you wish to try. Blenheim blanched at the thought of a younger Shanks drunk off his ass with 3 swords, still didn't know how the hell that was supposed to work, and shook his head. Nah, we'll pass. Which is why I am going to train him. Quote. Luffy might have something to say about that, Oyaji pointed out, and it was a valid point, even if it was a low blow. Mihawk shook his head. Zoro asked me to train him. It's between he and I. And you think the Strafut brat is just going to go along with it? Blenheim found himself asking. Hawkeye's looked towards where the 2 young pirates had vanished below deck. If he is half the captain Zoro thinks he is, no, even less than that, then yes. Whitebeard sighed gustily. He's not going to be happy about this. How long? 2 years. Mihawk smirked. By then your youngest son should be strong enough to leave the nest. Gahahaha. Fine then. 2 years, but not a moment longer. Newgate let out another chuckle. It should give us time to hunt down that traitor, too. I wish you luck with that. For now, I don't suppose you have anything to drink. It looks like I might be here a while. Zoro, Izo. Here he'd come over as soon as his shift was done to meet this Zoro character that Luffy'd spoken so highly of, and the jackass was asleep. Not only was he asleep, but he was sleeping while Luffy was fishing. Did the man not know how accident-prone the brat was, or did he just not care for the boy he claimed to see as his captain? Izo glared down at the green-haired fellow who was snoring softly, cursing him for his comfort. His mere presence was offensive. Not only did he dress like a total barbarian, but he dared to come here, of all places. Izo paused at the thought, shocked by the venom behind it. The crossdresser supposed he shouldn't be that surprised since he'd been subjected to Ace's tales of his adorable little brother long enough. Still, he knew that wasn't why he resented this man and what his very presence had done. No, it wasn't for Ace, and it wasn't for his own peace of mind, either. It was because this man being here was hurting Luffy, and that was unacceptable. Hell, it was all over the brat's posture. If the sword-wielding barbarian hadn't told Strafut that he wasn't staying, Izo'd toss his gun into the water below. And now the asshole was sleeping, leaving the poor guy to suffer alone. Didn't he know Luffy didn't take these kinds of things well at all? For all that the kid was generally a happy idiot, any fool could see that he cared deeply for his crew and being separated from them hurt. The little guy had probably been so relieved to see one of his nakama again, and the bastard just had to go and take the wind out of his sails. Not to mention the man smelled of sweat and stale sake. The only thing clean about him looked like those damn 3 swords of his. A loud splash had Izo's head snapping back around to the now empty spot on the railing where Luffy had been sitting just a second before. Luffy. Down below the water churned in the wake of the massive ship, disguising where the young devil fruit user had gone in. Time was of the essence as Izo kicked off his shoes and tossed his guns to the deck. Before he could even think about shouting out for help, a blur of green shot past him, shoving swords at him before diving overboard. He watched in shock as the man who'd been sleeping so soundly seconds before slipped gracefully into the water without a moment's hesitation before glancing down at the 3 swords he now held. He noticed the boots laying right where the man had been sleeping, too. The reaction time was impressive, suggesting he'd reacted before Izo's shout. In moments he spotted the man swimming one arm towards the side of the ship and tossed down one of the simple rope ladders found all over the place just for moments like this. He had thought that the man would have been a stronger swimmer than he was, but his progress seemed slow. At long last he made it to the rope and latched onto it, adjusting the rubbery team to hang over his shoulders as he climbed. Wondering at the awkward position, Izo leaned over slightly, ready to offer a hand. It was possible he'd hurt himself when he'd hit the water. Let go of the fishing pole, Luffy. Or Luffy could be being stubborn. No, yep, Luffy was being Luffy. Zoro sounded very annoyed. I'm not pulling you up until you drop it, you're dragging us both down. Stingy. Izo could hear Luffy half laugh. I don't want it to get away, Zoro. There was a huff and the rope shook as the green-haired man started to pull them both up towards the deck. Aye, Captain. Yosh, you get to reel it in, Zoro. Luffy cheered, flopping bonelessly onto the deck as the other Strafut pirate took the pole from him. It was bent almost double under the strain of whatever Luffy had managed to snag. This is why I hate fishing, Zoro muttered, walking to the rail. He let the line go slack for a second before pulling with all his might, muscles bulging as he threw his weight into it. Instead of breaking like Izo half suspected, a smaller-sized seeking was ripped from the water, momentum swinging it up and over them both to land on the deck next to Luffy with a thud where it lay stunned. Happy now, Luffy? Yep, Luffy grinned, picking up the massive beast. I'm going to go bring this to the kitchen. Isn't it a bit early to be thinking of food? Izo asked. Both of the younger pirates looked at him like he was nuts. It's never too early for food, Luffy told him seriously. Or booze, added Zoro. They both grinned. The fish slipped and Luffy seemed to remember what he was going to do. I'll be right back. Izo waited until the young captain had left his sight before turning his attention back to the green-haired man. He was currently topless, wringing out the water from his shirt and revealing an impressive scar across his chest. Zoro, is it? Dark green eyes glanced up at him for a second as a damp shirt was pulled over his head. Yeah. I've heard quite a bit about you from Luffy. He speaks quite highly of you. There was no reaction at all to his words, and it pissed him off. Yet at the same time, I have to wonder if perhaps you don't feel the same way towards him. True, you came here looking for him, but why? What is he to you? Luffy's the captain. Zoro shrugged. But he's still Luffy. Funny, Izo began when the man turned to walk away. You don't treat him like a captain at all. You treat him more like a little kid. Green eyes flashed dangerously as the man fingered the hilt of his sword and Izo wondered if he would draw it. Don't talk like you know everything. Luffy's going to be king. He needs the best at his side. What happened at Sabayati can't happen again. And what happened at Sabayati? We failed him, Zoro stated simply. Luffy seems to think he failed you. The swordsman gave him a look, one he knew all too well. It was one he saw on the face of his brothers when they went into battle to protect Oyaji. We failed our captain, and it will not happen again. Chopper, Kingdu. It's been a crazy last few days, Kingdu mused to himself as he turned his attention to the sky. Cloud watching wasn't an exciting pastime, but he'd always found it a good way to unwind after a long day. That was, if he could find somewhere relatively out of the way of his numerous brothers and sisters who inevitably insisted on pestering him. Particularly the newest brat. The Strafut idiot insisted on joining him and pointing out every single cloud that reminded him of food, which given the brat was was all of them. He wouldn't admit it, but he didn't find the kid's company that bad, for a brat. Sure, he was rough around the edges, but King Dude spent enough time listening to the young supernova's rambling tales to know he had potential. If he didn't get himself killed doing something insanely foolish first. Which sadly seemed to be part of how the brat worked. Honestly, he was shocked Ace hadn't gone gray at a young age dealing with the kid. His eyes traced a large cloud pattern that sort of resembled a ship if he squinted at it. I don't know if it's more shocking that he's made it this far, or that he'd managed to get a crew to follow him. If that sword brat Zoro's anything to go by, they've all got to be loyal as hell and half crazy to boot. The cloud dispersed as two overly large birds cut through it. The birds were a little more interesting looking than clouds, definitely not being ocean birds at all, not with those wing shapes. King Du wondered just where the hell the damn birds came from, because they'd been deliberately plotting a course away from any islands. It was a right pain in the ass, too, since it necessitated sending out divisions for supply runs. People were starting to get antsy enough that those on lookout actually called out an alert when the large avians circled back around. At first he thought they were just overreacting and he shifted around to go back to watching the clouds again until one of the birds swooped just feet above the crow's nest. The sails snapped in the wind generated, rocking the great ship as the bird let out a shrill cry. Even as the beast regained its altitude, King Du was shoving himself to his feet. While his brothers and sisters' eyes were on the retreating form, his eyes were glued to the rapidly descending one, and it didn't look like this bird was going to just buzz the sails to him. Racing to the port side deck, he shouted out to all available crewmen. To me, defend the port side. The call to arms came just in time as a hurricane force of blue feathers shot under the sails with a defiant-sounding screech at the obviously ineffective attempts to deter the monster. All that they accomplished was shaking loose a few oversized feathers that landed like lead on those too slow to get out of the way. King Du doggedly chased after the bird, hot on its tail feathers as it cleared the rails once more. Something, he didn't know what at first, came whipping at his head, causing him to duck as the bird banked sharply before gaining altitude. Warily he tracked the bird's flight up into the sky where the other was lazily circling. Deciding that the birds were no longer an immediate threat, he turned his attention to whatever it was that bird had tossed at him. His first concern was that it was some sort of marine attack. Maybe a bomb. God, he hoped it wasn't a bomb. Adjusting his arm guards just in case, he slowly turned, eyes scanning the deck for anything out of the ordinary. His eyes skipped over the large feather laying on deck, the barrels and rope, the deer in the boxes, spotting nothing out of the ordinary at first. The deer shifted, kicking its back hoof clear of a coil of rope, and King Doo's attention fixed right on it. "Hello there," he half whispered, so not to startle the ungulate, right arm raised between them in case it changed. He didn't expect any sort of answer or even acknowledgement at all, so he was surprised when the shaggy head came up, pink hat wedged between a strong set of antlers. Antlers that were not covered in velvet, but were smooth and sharp. Now, he might have been a pirate, but the 11th commander knew his fair share about land animals. Enough to know more about deer than the fact that they were delicious. Like the fact that the one eyeing him was probably in rut. The buck lifted a front hoof and stomped, leaving a gouge in the Adam's wood as it swung its rack from side to side, ears back. Definitely not a regular deer then. Why wasn't he even surprised by that? "Easy there, fella," he cautioned, raising his arm slightly from the guard position to something more ready as the deer danced forward on strong legs, head high. He wasn't sure, but he thought it was scenting the air. "No Sheila deer here for you, sorry." King Doo took a cautious step forward, trying to get close enough to grab the buck, unsure if slaying the creature was the smartest move to make. Not when it was wearing some kind of bag strapped to its back. The animal growled at him, head dropping low as it threatened him with its antlers before it leapt past him, bouncing off the rail and back onto the deck with a kick of its deadly hooves. Head up it beguiled loudly as it shoved crew members out of the way, racing around the deck with King Doo pounding after him, leading a growing group of would-be hunters. Passing a shocked Johnny, he snagged a length of hammock rope as he continued on. While he was no expert with a lasso, he entertained a vague thought of being able to trip the creature up before it skewered someone. He was relieved to see the wall to the commander's section coming up, knowing the deer would be forced to slow to turn or even stop. With Lick he could put an end to this silly chase and maybe get lunch out of it. Instead of slowing though, the buck sped up and launched itself at the wall, hooves thudding as it twisted its body around to welcome its pursuer with a faceful of antlers. As the 11th Division commander slid to a stop, he caught a flash of red cloth on the deck before his vision was completely obscured by flashing hooves lashing at his face. His blood froze, instantly recognizing the color even as those deadly hooves clattered scant inches from the unruly mop of black hair. Of all the places to take a nap, he snapped, scrambling back and holding his arm to stop his brothers from rushing the deer. "What's wrong, Commander?" He pointed at the deer. "I'll tell you what's wrong, Luffy's under there." "Then just kill the thing." "Are you stupid?" Someone else shot back. "Look at what it's doing to the deck. Those hooves are like knives. You want to risk that hitting the brat? Or those horns? They're antlers, you idiot." King Doo growled out. "Someone get Marco. He's a zone. Maybe he can talk to it." "I don't think it works that way, Commander." King Doo risked shooting Ronnie a glare over his shoulder. "It's that or we rush the damn beast and hope it doesn't gore one of us in the process, jackass. So, unless you got a better idea. Right then, I'll just go get Marco." The next few minutes seemed to take forever as the deer glared at them. He'd never seen such anger in a herbivore's face before. Every time one of them made to step forward, those razor-sharp hooves would come up and lash out before landing dangerously close to a still snoring Luffy. How he was still sleeping was amazing. Even more amazing when the buck's head ducked down briefly to snuffle against the sleeping teen's hair, earning a sleeping chuckle but nothing more. "For the last time, I'm not able to talk to animals, yoy." Marco sounded very annoyed as he came up behind him. "And that isn't a bird." "No, it isn't," King Doo admitted easily. "It's a deer of some sort." Marco let out an exasperated sound as their brothers made room for him in the front. For all that the 1st Division commander wasn't as tall or broad as he was, but even King Doo had hesitated to mess with the man back in the days before he'd known exactly who Marco the Phoenix was. So when the big brother of the Whitebeard pirates just gave the deer a lazy look that had the buck actually shaking, it was a tad bit funny, especially when there was no hockey involved. I can see it's a deer, King Du. Why haven't you taken care of it yet? This is more your thing, anyway. Normally I wouldn't argue with you about that, by the damn buck is right on top of the strafut brat. So that's where he went to. Don't you? So that's where he went to, me, Marco. This is a serious problem. Just have someone shoot the thing and be done with it. Marco shrugged, earning another growl from the deer. Marco paused, looking at the beast again. Recognizing that his brother was thinking about something, he chose to explain why they hadn't shot the damn deer. If we shoot it, it might thrash, and I'm not going to be the one to explain to Ace his brother was trampled to death by a deer on deck, are you? Good point. Yoy, the smaller blind sounded distracted. Grab it. Same issue. Plus, it's fast. He held up his arm for inspection, showing the thin line on his armguard where he'd barely managed to avoid being scored when the buck had spun to face them. And smart. Wicked smart. Marco's lip quirked slightly. You don't need a pet, Yoy. Yeah, you're right, he sighed. Thatch would probably try to cook it anyway. The deer reared slightly and stomped. So, what do you think? Well, if you can't shoot it, and you can't grab it, have you tried hockey? The 1st Division commander was still watching the buck carefully. I don't know, Marco. You never know with animals. Kigdu admitted. Normally it would have been the first thing I tried, but I think it's in rut. It'd be like hitting Ace with hockey when he's in a bad mood. There's no telling if he'd drop like a rock or go berserk on us. You think? Marco took a step forward and the deer's antlers came down, warning clear even without the deep rumble it made. The thing is scared out of its mind, I bet. I'll take it and you get Luffy away. We'll finish it off after. Better you than me, King Du agreed, sliding to the right. No. The voice was high-pitched, full of anger and fear, and he didn't know where it came from. The deer whipped its head quickly to the side, forcing the 11th Division commander back before he lost an eye. Marco wasn't so lucky, catching a rear hoof across the cheek as the deer spun in a tight circle, eyes rolling. You all right, Marco? I'll live. The phoenix was rueful, blue flames dancing close to his eye as the damage was repaired. He didn't sound angry or even annoyed. That hurt. I told you it was fast. Marco ignored him, easing forward once more. You need to calm down, Yoy. The buck stomped. You're going to hurt Luffy. Large brown ears swiveled forward before pinning back. I'd never hurt Luffy. The same high-pitched voice from before replied, full of scorn. Luffy's Luffy, asshole. Marco. King Du looked at the deer, then his brother. The deer just spoke. He did. It's a deer. I'm a reindeer, jackass. The deer snapped back, stomping a hoof. He felt stupid asking, but it still had to be done. So reindeer can talk? No, unless they've eaten the Hito Hito no mi, Yoy. Marco lazily put in. You're the Strafut's doctor, right? Tony Chopper. The deer reindeer shifted slightly. Yeah, so what if I am? King Du wasn't even going to question how an animal was a doctor. He vaguely recalled the brat going on about his doctor being amazing. It was impressive that the zone type found them, though. Why are you even here? Chopper looked around, surprised. I couldn't wait any longer. Luffy. Lunchtime. Meet. The brat exploded into movement like he hadn't just slept through a fight occurring over his head for the last half an hour, arms shooting up into the air. At first King Du was afraid that the idiot was going to accidentally hurt his reindeer doctor, or the other way around possibly. But judging by the lightning-fast reflexes Chopper exhibited, he could only conclude that this wasn't the first time something similar to this had happened. The buck went straight up with a shot that sounded a bit like Luffy and shifted into a smaller form, still flailing slightly as the dark-haired teen caught him in open arms and crushed the poor Zohan to his chest with a warm laugh. Chopper. Luffy, don't scare me like that, you jerk. Shehehehehe. Sorry. The brat didn't look sorry at all. Look guys, it's Chopper. He's the best doctor ever. Don't compliment me. It doesn't make me happy, you asshole. Somehow King Du thought the deer was lying. It might have been the giggly way it said that, or the slight wiggle. He nodded to the rest of the crew that had decided now would be a good time to leave before they were further piled into whatever this had turned into. He couldn't blame them after what had happened the last time one of the Strafuts had shown up. Then again, anyone who'd spent more than 5 minutes with Luffy would generally have the same reaction, he guessed. Of course, he and Marco weren't so lucky, being commanders and all. Right. Luffy was still grinning, ignoring the way his crewmember buried his face into his vest as he sat there. So, you beat anyone up, Chopper? What? No, I was looking for you, not trying to start a fight. Ah, you're no fun. Zoro tried to take on everyone here when he stopped by. Luffy grinned. He did. The little reindeer half yelped. He didn't pull his stitches again, did he? Nah. Luffy stood, stretching. Hey, Chopper, wanna stay here with me for a while? The teen shrugged. I need to get stronger. I couldn't protect you guys from Kuma. The little deer was suddenly between his captain and them once more, except he wasn't so little anymore. He now was as tall as King Do, a furry man-beast that was ready to pound both commanders into the deck. What did you say to Luffy? Chopper. And just like that, the zone turned small again, running up to the young captain. It's not true. It was our fault, Luffy. If I hadn't lost control, I'm sorry. Hey, it's fine, but, I was thinking. Luffy grinned, crouching down next to his little friend. I was thinking that because Zoro asked for some time to train, that maybe I could use the time to train here, too. Want to join me? You're not mad at us. Even King Do could answer that one. It was a foolish question and the reindeer seemed to know it even as he asked it. I want to get stronger, too. There was a pause. But. The island I was on. Luffy, it had all these books on medicine. If I studied them, I think I could be more use to you. But I don't want to leave you, either. His heart went out to the both of them, even as the Strafut captain gave one of his signature chuckles. Then you should stay there, okay, Chopper. But only if you promise me you'll work really hard. The little doctor nodded, tears in his eyes. We'll meet up in 2 years at Rip-Offs. Again a nod. Yosh. Before you leave, you have to try Thatch's cooking. It's not as good as Sanji's but it's still really good. Really? Yep. Jinbei. Jinbei thought it was high time he paid his friend Whitebeard a visit. The Yonko needed to know what the Marines were planning, especially when there was a strong chance that Ace was going to go running headlong into danger. Not that he could hold it against the lad, the Marines were targeting his little brother, after all. Worse still, they'd sent that treacherous excuse for a man, Teach, after the boy. Hell, he half expected to arrive on deck and find Ace-kun tied to the mast. It's what he would do in Oyaji's place. When he arrived on deck, everything was surprisingly normal. Members of the large crew called out in greeting as they continued about their work. It was one thing being told that he was welcome here anytime, but it was another to see it for himself. Very few crews were so laid back about other pirates showing up on their ship. Whitebeard was different, though. When the old man accepted you, he did so with no reservations and you were family. Even if you didn't want it at first, like with Ace. Of course, it made what that scum Blackbeard had done all the more horrendous. Whitebeard. He nodded, greeting the large man as he approached the chair. Jinbei. What brings you here? I was in the area. Whitebeard grinned down at him. What you mean, brat, is you wanted to see if I'd heard the news about Teach, right? He couldn't help but smile in return. I also wanted to visit Thatch and see how he was doing. My son is doing fine. He's back to his old self. The other captain took a drink. I think he's playing cards on the port side with some others. I'm glad to hear it. Maybe I'll go join them. His smile fell slightly. Whitebeard, the Marines are going to offer Teach a position as Shichibukai if he can bring them Strafut Luffy. I know, brat. The world's strongest man was not someone to trifle with, and the look he had on his face right then was a fierce reminder. Shanks and Mihawk have both expressed their concerns over it. Mihawk. That came as a surprise. Shanks. Not so much. It was no secret that he had a weak spot for the Strafut kid and Ace as well. Not that Jinbei was sure why. Shanks wasn't known to be exactly welcoming with rookies as a whole. He just chalked it up to Ace being Luffy's brother. He didn't say anything at the meeting. I am not surprised. The smile was back. Go. Check on your friends. Ace is around somewhere as well. We will discuss this later. Jinbei nodded. Where'd you say the card game was? The game wasn't that hard to find, in reality. All he had to do was listen for the sounds of despair as Thatch lost another hand. Coming up behind the man, he cast a large shadow on the 4 players. When did you get here, Jinbei? Vizita asked, shuffling the deck. A little while ago. I needed to talk to Whitebeard. Join us, Yoi. Who's winning? He ginned at Marco, knowing the answer without having to ask. It was a little obvious with the small stack of berry next to the 1st Division commander. The bird brain cheats, you know. You mean he cheats better than you? Vista laughed, holding up the deck to Jinbei. The fishman shook his head and the 5th Division commander started to deal. If you're wondering where Ace is, last I heard he was still in his room. Oh, late night, something like that, Marco muttered, fiddling with his cards before anteing in. Ace came storming up, fury etched in every line of his body. At first, Jinbei was happy to see his friend, but then he saw the expression on the young man's face as he approached the group. None of them bothered to look up from the card game that was going on. Where the hell is he? Where's Hu Yoi? Marco threw down 2 cards and tapped the deck, signaling he wanted more. You know who? That whoring son of a bitch. I'm raising. Don't ignore me. Where is that traitor? Storm gray eyes fixed Jinbei with a glare. You know where he is, don't you? The Shichibukai had been afraid of this. While Ace being on the ship was fantastic, it meant that he'd most likely been told already that Teach was after his brother. That being the case, it was only a matter of time before he did something foolish. Since that scum Blackbeard would be much easier to locate than his brother, who even the Marines had yet to hear a single word on in weeks, Jinbei knew what he would do. Commendable, but foolish. I don't know where he is, Ace-kun. You're not lying to me, are you? Thatch snorted. Come on, why would he do that? Because you're all against me, that's why. You too, Thatch. After what happened, I thought you'd be on my side. The pompadoured man laughed. Yeah, he got me pretty good. It was official, the Whitebeard pirates were insane. For a crew that saw each other as family, he'd have thought they'd have taken such a betrayal a little harder. Looked like only Ace was taking it hard though. Either that or Thatch was playing it cool and trying to defuse the situation. Since this was Thatch, it was hard to tell sometimes. The 4th Division commander never seemed to take anything serious, making him a hard read in and out of battle. Still, judging by the way Ace was starting to steam, Jinbei might want to move. None of you are going to help me, are you? No pay. Thatch grinned. Marco folded his cards, placing them on the deck. I'm out, Yoi. It's between you two, Vista muttered, shifting his cards. I raise again, Thatch. Feeling brave, are we? I hate you guys, Ace snarled. You too, Jinbei. Leave Jinbei out of it, Yoi. Oyaji told you he was your responsibility. Vista glanced up at the captain of the Sun Pirates. Besides, he has no clue what we're talking about. Jinbei was a bit insulted by that. You're talking about Blackbeard, of course. When I get my hands on Teach I'm going to kill him. Ace spat. But no, I'm not looking for him right now. A look of worry crossed his face. Unless he's heading this way. Suddenly he had the complete and undivided attention of 4 commanders. It was a little unnerving. Not that I've heard. He's looking for Strafut right now. So he's not coming here, then? Thatch asked, clarifying for some strange reason. Why would he? All 4 of them looked equally smug and guilty for all of 3 seconds before raucous laughter cut through the air. Ace's face contorted in anger and he took off again. There he goes. Vista sighed. What happened this time? I think he stole his hat, Yoi. Marco sighed, leaning back. At least he didn't end up died. That was pretty funny. You, that is, not me in pink. Actually, the brat stole all his pants and his hat. Ace must have just found that pair. Thatch chuckled. Brat's bored. Jinbei cleared his throat, drawing all eyes to him. Who are you talking about? A warm weight collided with his back, almost throwing him off his feet. As he stumbled slightly he saw Stefan run past, wearing a distinctive orange hat. Hello Luffy. Hi, mini mustache. A voice chuckled from behind Jinbei, followed by a playful yelp. A blur of red, yellow and black ducked around him and sat with the 3 older pirates, pulling Jinbei down to sit as well. He's not going to fall for that at all, Yoi. Marco was promptly shushed. Ace went charging by at that moment. He saw the group and shot the youngest a dark look. I see you there, Luffy. This isn't over. Wait until I get my hat back, and then you're dead. You hear me? I'm going to. Wait. No. Bad Stefan. Drop it. Shehehehe. Ace is funny. Ace is going to kill you one of these days. Thatch laughed. Nah. He's not really trying. Not like when we were kids. He really tried then. Once he tossed me off a bridge over a ravine, and then there was this time with the tree. And the boulders. And that time with the crocodiles. And the snake. The wolves. The boy seemed to think about it for a second. It's all right though, because Ace is Ace, and he was lonely. That was both frightening and insightful. Thatch commented, turning to Jinbei. Oh yeah, you haven't met the brat yet, have you? Jinbei. This is Monkey D. Luffy. Brat. This is Jinbei. Large bug eyes stared hard at the whale fishman and he returned the look. He'd definitely not been expecting to run into the very pirate that had the world government in such a stir aboard the Moby Beep. He had to admit, it was the last place people would look for him. You're Luffy-kun. Ace has told me a lot about you. Are you a fishman? He was very blunt. Yes. Jinbei waited to see what the brat would do, what kind of human he was. Cool. Do you know Hatchin? Thatch cuffed the boy lightly on the back of the head. Idiot. There's a lot of fishmen, not all of them know each other. I do. Noticing the surprised looks he explained. He and I used to be a part of the same crew before the Arlong pirates split off from the Sun pirates. The boy's expression soured, and he caught Marco making a cut-off gesture. You're friends with Arlong. I hate Arlong. He made Nami cry. Excuse me. Thatch's hand flew out and slapped against the younger pirate's mouth. Long story, ask later. When Ace is there to translate. He turned to the brat. They're not friends, alright. Jinbei's kinda like an unofficial son of Oyaji's. It'd be official, except he's a Shichibukai. Like Sand Croc and Leek Guy. Like who? Yeah, like them. Mihawk and Kuma, too. Vista agreed. Wait, Sand Croc, are they talking about Crocodile and Moria then? Ooh, cool. The brat grinned at him brightly. That's awesome. Hey, do you want to fight me? Luffy. The six of them all looked up to see an annoyed-looking Ace coming back towards them, his hat slightly damp from what Jinbei assumed was slobber. No picking fights with people you just met. Oh, the youngest laughed, getting up and running. Ace thundered by after his younger brother. Get back here. After a moment of silence Jinbei finally spoke up. Do I want to know? Probably not, Yoi, Marco advised him. Thatch nodded his agreement. Plausible deniability, my friend. So, this is what Whitebeard meant when he said he'd talk to me later. Yep, all three of the other pirates agreed. Okay then, deal me in. He took the cards Thatch handed him. Vista started the pot this time. Before you ask, yes, they're almost always like that. I wasn't even going to ask. Jinbei grinned. They're brothers. Exactly. And it's our job as older, wiser, more mature. Says who? Thatch ignored Marco except to punch him in the arm. Brothers to ignore the antics of the youngest members, right? Until they need help, that is. Vista added. Doesn't even need to be said. That's a given, of course. Jinbei agreed, because it was true. Even if the youngest brother didn't realize he was a member of the family yet. That meant he'd have to do his part, too, of course. Something told him he was going to be having a long talk with Whitebeard later. Atmos. The raid on the merchant ship had gone smoothly. Pathetically smoothly, if you asked Atmos. Glaring down at the captain of the ship, he delivered another kick to the man's ribs on principle. After he was convinced his vicar opponent wasn't going to be getting back up, he turned his attention to the rest of his division, many of whom were waiting for orders. All right, you know the drill, sack and scuttle this scow. Don't leave a barrel behind. I mean it this time, you bastards. We need to refill the larder again, he urged, earning half-hearted laughs as everyone got to work. It seemed to be a merchant vessel of some sort, well stocked with a variety of goods. Atmos didn't have time to conduct a full inventory, but he thought there was enough to get them to the next harbor. Plenty to sell as well. This was the part he wasn't quite as fond of, digging around in the other ship. The fighting was fun, and he definitely enjoyed seeing what the hull was, but getting it all on their ship and then back safely to the Moby Beep was a right pain in his ass. Once on board the larger ship he'd have the space and time to go over everything and divvy it up properly. One of his brothers went by with what seemed to be a cage with a skeleton in it, of all things. Atmos blinked, staring in surprise after the man who continued to load their boat with the unusual good as he tried to figure out what the hell was up with it. In the end he turned his attention back to a particularly large barrel that was giving another some trouble. At best the remains were some kind of rare artifact, at worst it was a poor soul who needed to be laid to rest. A wicked grin crossed his face as he carefully handed off the barrel below deck. If nothing else, it would make an excellent prank for Thatch. He still owed his brother for somehow bending the horns of his helmet. "Hurry up, you lot," he hollered, grin still stretched wide across his thick teeth. Atmos couldn't wait to return to the ship. "Break, Thatch," Atmos waved, getting the 4th Division commander's attention. It took a moment for the man to extract himself from the strafut brat, who had been clinging to him like some kind of sea star. With the smiles both wore, the leader of the 13th Division was slightly worried for whomever their newest victim was. Thatch seemed happy enough as he came jogging over, though the wide smile slipped from his face the moment he was out of sight of Luffy and he let out a sigh. "What, the brat tiring you out already?" "Hardly. I just feel bad for him. He's not a complete idiot, Atmos. He knows you went on a raid today. Poor Brad is feeling a bit cooped up on the ship and I can't blame him. He's a pirate, after all. Adventures in his blood." Atmos couldn't argue that point. Even if he doubted the sanity of any crew who'd follow the strafut brat, it was obvious that he did have a crew if the reindeer and swordsman were anything to go by. That didn't mean he thought particularly well of the crew, not with the risks they were bound to take with such an energetic idiot leading them. What I don't understand is how his crew just goes along with his dumb ideas. He's tried no less than 3 times to pick a fight with ships passing in the distance. Ace says that's just how he is. It's dangerous and stupid. I can see how younger crewmen might respect that as brave or something, but surely he has a few seasoned members on his crew. Why do they let their so-called captain get away with this shit? Thatch offered a shrug, but his look became guarded. Apparently the little shit was getting to him. After a moment the 4th Division commander spoke. "So you call me over here just to bitch or to show me the haul?" Atmos broke into a wide grin, thoughts of the annoying rookie banished temporarily from his mind as he slapped his brother on the back and steered him towards the stairs. They'd already stashed the haul below deck, as per Oyaji's orders, and everything was set up for the prank he had been planning since he saw the remains. "Right this way. Got some good stuff this time, wait till you see." Thatch followed him easily, not suspecting a thing. Atmos had to fight to keep the grin off his face as he turned on the lantern in the cargo hold. Everything had been neatly arranged based on size, and labeling of the goods hadn't quite officially begun. Still, he knew where the particular item he was looking for was. He was the one who had arranged where the cage would be put, after all. "Wow, look at these fabrics. Don't let Izo see them or we'll never be able to sell them," Thatch joked, fingering a colorful brocade. Atmos pointed to the pile of fabric boots. "I'm sure we can spare 1 or 2 for him." "Just 1 or 2, Thatch joked, moving on. "Nice spices. Not top of the line, but still some I could use." "Well, anything we don't need we'll just sell," he agreed, slowly drawing his brother towards his goal. A quick glance showed that the cage was still covered with the burlap he'd placed over it. On the opposite side of the narrow walkway between goods he had been sure to place a set of nice swords that were to attract Thatch's attention. The moment the 4th Division commander spied the hilts he abandoned all pretense of exploring and made a beeline for those swords, just like Atmos knew he would. "Would you look at these beauties?" Thatch grinned, reverently holding up one of the blades to the poor light provided by the lantern. "Looks like full tang. Good, solid work," he muttered, backing up till he was nearly against the cage for the room to give the blade a practice swing. Atmos took advantage of his distraction and yanked off the burlap. One good swing later and Thatch turned towards him, and the cage undoubtedly to ask for the swords. Instead he shrieked like a green marine on their first mission, nearly dropping the blade as he flailed and stumbled back away. "What the hell is that?" "What, don't you like it?" Atmos laughed. No I don't. Not funny, you asshole," Thatch growled out, punching him in the arm before looking at the remains with a shudder. Poor bastard. Atmos nodded, deciding to answer the unasked question. We're going to give him a proper burial at sea as soon as Johnny picks the lock. Horrible way to go, caged like that. Wonder who he was. Thatch sighed, turning away and picking up the other sword. These are mine now, you bastard. Yeah, whatever. He laughed, turning to go only to be stopped by a skeletal hand on his shoulder. Really, Thatch? TTT, that's not me. Thatch squeaked out. Excuse me, but could I have something to drink, please? Turning his head slowly, he saw the dead body standing up, with his other hand resting on the cage door that now stood open. Empty eye sockets stared at him and he swallowed. I was having a nice nap, but that screaming could wake the dead. Yo-ho-ho-ho. Sorry. Thatch tried. Oh, not at all. I must continue my search for Luffy-san. Getting mistaken as a demon set me back. Especially when they sold me. Lucky for me I had a skeleton key. Skull joke. Atmos started to back away slowly. Either he was hallucinating or there was a walking, talking skeleton, which could be an improvement to seeing things, or worse. As the thing took a step forward, he decided it was definitely worse. He made the sign of the cross, which had no effect other than earning a laugh. You? Thatch cleared his throat and tried again. You're Brooke, right? The musician of the Strafut crew. Ah, you've heard of me. That gives me such a warm feeling in my heart, but I don't have one. Atmos glared at Thatch while the now identified Brooke went on about a skull joke. What? If you spent any time with the brat you'd know this. Even though Thatch was still pale, he reached out and put a hand on the taller man, before grinning up at the skull. Well, you are in luck, my bony friend. Luffy just happens to be here and I'm sure he'd love to see you, after we take you for a quick tour around the ship, right, Atmos? Thatch smirked at him. It took the larger man all of 3 seconds to figure it out. If they'd been freaked out a little, just think of how those who weren't division commanders would react. His answering grin was just as wide and had the bone man nervously laughing. Sounds like a fantastic plan. Sabo, Moby Beep is in sight. We'll be pulling up alongside it shortly. He said, poking his head in the cabin to let Robin know. So you can ask about your captain and I'll just wait. You'll be coming with me, of course. Nico. Robin smiled politely at him, closing her book as she stood. Most people wouldn't dare cut him off, but then again, she wasn't most people. The Resistance had quickly learned that her reputation was well deserved and Robin was not a woman one wanted to cross. They were still all trying to figure out how she ended up serving under Strafut Luffy. Given what they knew of his personality, it was more likely she'd have murdered him in his sleep than willingly gone looking for him. That was Luffy for you, though. So here she was, bossing around Resistance members and forcing them to tangle with the Whitebeard pirates on a whim. At least, that's what he thought. Kuma had sent each of the Strafut pirates to where they'd both be the safest and grow in strength, so he was sure Luffy was fine. It didn't make much sense that so far the Resistance had reports of 2 Strafuts making contact with the Whitebeard pirates before leaving hours later. If anything, he'd have assumed they all would have headed back to the archipelago. Robin, however, had just smiled and said they must have gone to see Ace. Because, for whatever reason, the hothead should know where his little brother was, even though he'd never much seemed to care before. Or even after Luffy'd gone out to sea. Obviously he didn't know, because if he did, the Strafuts wouldn't have left. He pointed this all out to Robin, even going so far as to suggest all of them popping in was just going to upset Ace more if he knew anything about the guy, and she'd overruled him, going straight to Dragon. Even their leader didn't mess with the woman once she'd calmly threatened his life if he didn't let her find her captain his son. By the time they'd pulled even with the ship, a good-sized crowd had gathered, looking down at them. A good many of the crew had weapons drawn already and looked ready to defend their ship. Robin didn't let that deter her, walking over to the outer wall of the Moby Beep and ignoring the shouts from above. I really don't think that me going with you is a good idea, she didn't answer, just started to climb up the limbs she had sprouted from the side of the much bigger vessel. Each hand waved at him to hurry up. They're pirates, I'm a rebel. This is going to end badly. As Luffy-san would say, it will be an adventure. She really wasn't taking no for an answer. Luckily no one decided to shoot them on their way up, and before long he was standing right behind Robin as she faced a more than slightly hostile crowd. "May I speak with your captain, Whitebeard-san? I thought we were here to see Ace," he hissed. If he had to choose, he'd rather face Ace and get killed quickly. "Thank you very much. Since I never met him and at the time he met up with Captain San I was an enemy, that might not be the best idea," she replied, a knowing look on her face. A man pushed his way through the crowd. He had a pompadour and wore a chef's outfit. Somehow he wasn't surprised the 4th Division commander had taken an interest. The man had an easy smile on his face, despite one hand resting on the hilt of one of his swords. "Nico Robin, right? Yes, I'm Thatch. I bet I know what you're here for." He grinned. "I'll take you to see Oyaji, the both of you if you're willing to vouch for this guy." No, that's quite alright. If you could. I have a feeling Portgas-san would be very interested to meet the second in command of the resistance." He didn't have to see the look on her face to know that she was smug. It was written all over the curious look Thatch was giving him as he led the way to an oversized chair on deck. The man ignored the crowd that followed them, which was most definitely not an honor guard, and kept his attention on the two of them. "Why is that?" He squinted slightly. "Your name is Sabo or something, right? Don't act so surprised, of course we've heard about you. Oyaji likes to keep informed about what's going on in the world. Cuts down on snot-nosed brats getting into trouble over their heads." "Gahahaha," Whitebeard boomed, overhearing them as they approached. The man really was impressively intimidating even in his old age. Just like Dragon had said. "Doesn't always work, though. Some of my sons still need a helping hand every now and then." Thatch grinned. "Even if they don't know they're your son, Oyaji." "Hush, brat," Whitebeard admonished, leaving Sabo to wonder exactly what the other had meant by that. "So you're the infamous Nico Robin. We've been expecting you. I'm sure some of my children are less happy to see you than others. There has been quite the betting pool on which of you Strafut brats would be the next to show up." "Then that makes this easier." Robin smiled back up at the man. "Can you tell me where he is? Captain San?" Whitebeard had a twinkle in his eye when he replied, "At the moment, no. I told you this was a waste of time. We should go. Now would be good," Sabo griped, shifting from foot to foot. If they waited too long Ace might show up. Something told him Ace would blame him for Luffy going missing, too. "Impatient, aren't you, brat? Don't call me that." "Gahahaha. Well, could I speak with Portgas-san?" Robin asked, ignoring them both after a hand rose out of Sabo's shoulder and covered his mouth. "I don't mind," Whitebeard said, leaning back and picking up a tankard. "When he realizes we have company, you may speak with him." Sabo bit the hand covering his mouth, causing it to vanish. "Really? That's not necessary." When everyone stared at him, Robin with a creepy grin, he swallowed convulsively. He didn't want to meet Ace right now. His brother was going to kill him for not telling him where the hell he was all this time. Sabo wanted to live a little bit longer, thank you very much. He still needed to see Luffy become Pirate King. Besides, being burned to death by Ace sounded exceedingly painful even if he might totally did deserve it. "There's no need to wake him. I'll leave a note." "That would be fine, right Miss Robin? A note would give him a head start." "He's not sleeping," Thatch said, giving him an odd look. "He's off playing with Haruta and the other brat." "Other brat? Oh, well, no need to interrupt. 2 against 1 isn't fair." A shout rang out, the sound of footfalls making their way over to them. "Pirates!" 2 voices chorused. "Hey, no hiding behind giant mustache guy. Oyaji, help." A flash of orange, tan, and black darted past, skidding to a stop at the far side of the chair. "Safe. Oyaji," one of the other voices whined from within the crowd. The old man laughed. "That's enough, you 3. We have guests." A large hand nudged the orange hat. Sabo swallowed convulsively and tried to duck behind Robin, only to find his feet held to the floor by hands. She was an evil woman. "Ace, they are here to speak to you." "Oh." Ace turned and faced them and Sabo's heart did a strange little twist. He'd never seen his brother so happy looking, so content. Even looking at the wanted poster he'd still imagined his brother to be the angry youth he remembered, full of hate for the world, and for himself. He's finally found himself. Gray eyes flitted over him with a frown before settling on Robin. The smile broke into a wide grin. Hey, you're Robin. Lou won't shut up about you and your books. He bowed. Thanks for trying to save my brother from himself. I know he's a bit of a lost cause, but... No, Luffy-san saved me. Robin answered, a look of pure happiness on her face. I take it Luffy-san is all right. Ace smirked. You could say that. His eyes trailed over to Sabo again and he frowned. Who the hell are you? I'm Portgas-san. Sabo-san insisted on giving me a lift. He was very concerned about your younger brother. Robin lied smoothly. He refused to stay in hiding any longer while his brothers might need him. Ace blinked in surprise before his expression darkened, flames licking at his skin as the rest of his crew wisely took a step back. Sabo wished he could. Even with Robin no longer holding him in place, he knew running would just make it worse. Hiding. You were in hiding. A flaming fist came flying at his face. Just before it connected, the flames went out, still leaving Sabo to face a brutal right hook that sent him sprawling. We thought you were dead, you asshole. Sabo looked up, holding his cheek when the next blow didn't come. He'd never realized they thought was dead. He was going to have some words with Dragon when he got back. He was shocked to see that Ace was being held back by some brave fool. Still, he wasn't going to let the moment go to waste. I'm sorry, Ace. I thought you. Dogra saw your ship go down, Sabo. Ace cut him off, murder in his eyes. We mourned you, you bastard. Sabo slowly got to his feet, reaching out towards his brother who was now staring down at the deck, fists clenched. He hadn't ever meant to hurt Ace like that. And Luffy. He couldn't imagine what his little brother thought. No, he deserved Ace's hate. If they never wanted to see him again, he'd understand. All just you. A hand shot out, and Sabo found himself pulled against Ace's chest, his brother's face against his shoulder as the other openly cried. You stupid beep, why didn't you tell us? He didn't have an answer, not really. Not a good one. I didn't think you'd have known about the ship. He finished lamely. Idiot. Ace huffed out, letting go and wiping his tears away. Just in time too, as something hard collided with Sabo's middle. Hey, don't break him. We just got him back. I hoped you were dead and I wasasawed. The bird that was actually his little brother cried, almost hugging the life out of him. Can't breathe. Sabo wheezed out just before the arms loosened slightly. He'd forgotten how dangerous being hugged by Luffy could be. I'm sorry. I miss you. Too, Luffy. Both of you, he said, hugging the youngest back. He blinked. Luffy, what are you doing here? Sabo stammered, gaping down at the straw hat. Well, Luffy said into his shirt, they were trying to sell Kami and... Robin chuckled. I believe he meant how you ended up here exactly, Luffy-san. I've already told him about the attack. The team looked over at Robin before looking up at Sabo with a wide smile on his face, refusing to let go. A glance over at Ace showed his other brother had this pained expression on his face. Sabo remembered him wearing a similar expression when dealing with Luffy as children. Oh, I crashed here, shihihihi. He felt sorry for the crew. Though it was a bit difficult with the death grip Luffy had on his waist, he managed something of a bow towards the Whitebeard pirates. I'm sorry you had to put up with Luffy. Ace growled at him before lashing out and whacking Sabo on the head, sending his hat to the ground. Damn right you should be sorry. You left Luffy with me. You're supposed to be the responsible one. I nearly got him killed by a bear thanks to you going off. How is that my fault? Sabo sputtered. Ace colored slightly, suggesting he was possibly jealous of all things of Luffy still hugging Sabo. It wasn't like Sabo asked for Luffy to hold on. You left. You didn't even write. Desperately he worked on getting the rubber idiot to let go. You didn't either. I gave him a Vivre card in Alabasta. Ace sniffed, looking smug. Sabo saw red, thinking about what Robin had told him about Alabasta. Talk about your irresponsible big brother. You left him to face a Shichibukai alone in Alabasta. Finally he managed to pry Luffy off, which was good since right now he was reminded about how he'd wanted to beat the shit out of Ace for that. His brother gave him a look like he was stupid, first stopped a marine. Shichibukai, Ace, he could handle it. Luffy's fine. The other protested, arms crossed as he looked away. Sabo grabbed him by the shoulders, remembering when it had been easier back when Ace had worn a shirt, and shook him. He stuck a hook through his guts, Ace, and poisoned him. What the beep were you thinking? It made him feel better when his brother blanched for a moment before that old spark of anger came rushing back. Sheehehehe. I still won. Stay out of this. They chorused like they had many times in their childhood. I was busy, Ace protested. Doing what? Because what could be more important than protecting their precious baby brother? Ace waved a hand vaguely at his crew before pointing at Luffy, and it clicked right before he said, protecting Luffy. Making Sabo feel a little like an ass, but still, it could have waited. Ace wasn't done though. He snarled right back into Sabo's face. And you, where the hell were you and your precious resistance when he declared war on the world, huh? Ace's hand fell onto the hilt of his dagger as he leaned forward, getting right into Sabo's face. Oh, don't you even go there. He snapped back, hand on his pipe. We at least got him out of Sabayati. He swung the pipe around only to have Ace counter it with a small blade. The bastard had expected him to try and attack first for a change. You should have known him being there was a bad idea. Since when does he listen to anyone? Ace growled, countering with a blow of his own. For a few moments, the sound of metal on metal was all that could be heard. Sabo and Ace were still evenly matched, and both grinned viciously at each other as they closed once more, trying to force the other to the ground. Sabo thought he just might have had the advantage as he felt Ace shift slightly under him when they were both tackled from the side, sending them both to the ground. I win. Luffy cheered as he perched on top of them both before hugging the two older men close. You cheater. Ace smiled at Luffy, eyes soft before looking at Sabo. His expression was guarded for a moment before he offered a warm smile that felt like home to the blonde. He's missed you. Sabo heard what Ace really meant, though. He always did. I missed you too. A giggle interrupted them. Sabo, hey. Wanna join my crew? No. Stingy. Luffy pouted before laughing as he sat up, dragging them both with him. He turned to Robin. Nay, I'm gonna stay here a bit and get stronger, Robin. I'm gonna get so strong that nothing like that will ever happen to us again. He grinned. I'm sure you will, Captain. Robin's look was the most content look he had seen on her face. Then I should get stronger, as well. If he had been expecting Luffy to protest that she was strong enough, or that she didn't need to go to the trouble, Sabo was out of luck. Instead his brother nodded, looking serious for the briefest of moment. We'll all meet again at Sabayati, in about 2 years' time, all right. I look forward to seeing how much you've grown. Robin smiled. Do the others know? Well, I've talked to Zoro, Chopper and Brook about it already. But I don't know where Usopp, Frankie and Nami are. Do you? Well, I'm sure they'll find their way to you. Robin offered a slight shrug. I wouldn't worry too much. Right. Luffy nodded. But while you're here we should have a party. Hey, you brat. Oyaji's the one who decides stuff like that. Thatch grumbled, smiling all the same. Gahahaha. Of course we can party, brat. Whitebeard laughed, grinning down at Luffy and Ace. You don't find a brother every day, son. Of course this calls for a party. As Sabo was nearly strangled again by Luffy's enthusiastic hug and Ace's only slightly more restrained one, he had to wonder just who, exactly, Whitebeard meant by son. To be continued. Remember to subscribe and like this video, and see you in the next video.